averages.
Right, I'll figure it out. Don't worry about it. Yeah. Don't know what we're going to argue about, but I'm assuming we're going to argue about something. I definitely am going to turn part of this, as long as the audio is okay, because I know I'm having some trouble with that, into some sort of podcast. But I don't know when it'll release either. I mean, we've got the draft coming up. I'm probably going to release a draft episode and then a post-draft episode. But we'll fit you in. We'll get you in there somewhere, Tan.
No worries.
Thanks for joining me.
Yeah, absolutely. Pleasure.
Really appreciate it. Why don't we start with, who are you, my man? Tell everyone who you are, what you do, where they can find you.
Yeah, I'm Tan. I got my start in Dynasty, doing some Dynasty Excel sheets, and then eventually kind of slowly got sucked into doing Dynasty apps. So you can find me at @_Tanho, TANHO, that on Twitter. I run dynastyprocess.com, which is a site basically where I host all of the apps and various Excel sheets I've cluttered and built up over the years. And since last year, I've been a developer at DLF, occasionally moonlighting as a writer. I think I'm listed as a writer there, actually, which is kind of odd because I haven't written anything in, I don't know, 6 months or so. I feel like I'm slacking a little there. In any case, I do a lot of, I like to look at processes. I like to look at how I analyze things, more so than specific player or, game takes. I'd like to analyze how teams respond in your league. I try to, anytime I see breaking news, I think, what would my league mates do? And then how do I capitalize on that? More so than what is this player's new value based on, whatever news has happened. So usually I'm trying to do the opposite. I'm trying to think about doing the opposite and figuring out if it's any good, really, in terms of what's going on.
Wow, man, you're a really big nerd. And I don't know what any of that means. So it sounds great. I know you from working with DLF. You're mostly the nerd we throw the hard stuff at, and you go figure it out. I wanted to talk to you a little bit about trying to convert draft capital or draft round or draft picks into auction values, because it's something I kind of want to take on because I've been asked to. Problem is, normally when I get a question like that, I have a couple of thoughts and I chase them down and I see what's what, and you move on from there. But the only thing that ended in my head when someone told me to do that was static. Just that's the only noise that went on in my head. Like I have no initial question. I'm like, I don't know really how to approach that. So I want to talk to you a bit about it, being one of the bigger nerds that I know. And then I guess because the draft is coming up, spoiler, the draft hasn't happened yet when we recorded this, but I want to talk to Tan, so I'm going to talk to Tan, and I'll just figure it out from there. But hopefully we'll get to talk a little bit about the draft. But based on what you were telling me before we went live, I don't know if you knew there was a draft coming. Like, I'm pretty sure that was news to you. You're like, what? I don't know. So we'll find out. I guess we went live just in case it doesn't turn into an episode. We can at least prove that it happened. We've got Zach Reed from the Dynasty Dummies, now of some acronym I can't really remember right now. DLFPN network. I forget. Asking if this is the open bar. It is not. You can tell because sorry, Tab, but neither of us are that attractive or that cool. So that's one way to tell the difference between us and the open bar. And a bunch of other people. I asked specifically if anyone wanted to come troll, so I'm assuming this is going to get fun real quick. An open bar here. No. That unfortunately, we're not that guy, JD. We're just not that cool. And Joshua, Twitch bar was empty. Had to come over here. Well. We're glad to be your last choice, frankly. But yeah, Tad, could you tell me a little bit about, like, literally, when they said convert draft picks into auction values, all I got was static in my head. So what's the first question? Where do you start with something like that?
Yeah. So when you say draft picks, you're talking about like ADP and ranks, essentially, right?
Yeah. If you say Saquon Barkley's a 101 overall, how much do you pay for him in an auction draft? And I assume you have to go through percentages, because every auction has a different value, right? It could be $100 to spend. It could be $1,000. It could be, $33 if it's a John Bosch league, because he likes to do weird things like that. I assume. I don't know.
Yeah, John does those things.
So I assume percentage is the best way to think about, how much of your auction budget would you spend on the 101 in a standard startup?
Yeah, this actually comes back to an area I'm very familiar with. I would actually not start with percentages. The first thing that you think about is actually trade calculator values. And the reason for that is it actually gives you some kind of proportionate estimate of what a player is worth relative to another player. Right? Like that's literally what the purpose of trade calculators are for. How accurate they are, you pick between 2 calculators or 3 different calculators or what have you. But the idea of trade calculators is that that's what gives you a proportionate value between one player to another. And so the nitty gritty of getting to that value, everyone's got a secret sauce to it. I'm actually part of 2 secret sauces because I developed Dynasty Process, so I built the algorithm for that based only on things I could get for free and based on Fantasy Pro specifically, so what I could scrape from their site. And I'm also part of a really awesome team at DLF that builds the Trade Analyzer. And we do a little bit more over there. We've got access to a little bit more data with trade analysis and some learning algorithms on that. And basically, both of those things essentially try to wrap everything up, all of the players, into one number. And then from that number, you can derive the proportions of what each player is worth relative to another. And then getting to an auction value is actually just scaling appropriately that trade calculator value to the auction. Haven't lost you yet, have I?
Oh yeah. Pretty much the minute you started talking, and then there was some talk of an algorithm, and I pretty much blanked out and started reading comments. So essentially, what you're saying is you're trying to equate the two to some sort of common denominator, like a Rosetta Stone. Essentially, you're relating Saquon Barkley to auction by relating them both to his trade value.
Correct. Yeah, absolutely. You don't go straight from rankings to percentages because the rankings are linear, right? So really getting to because you can value them in a straight line, he's 101, he's 102, 103. It's really hard to go, okay, but you should spend this many dollars on him. So there's a lot of pre-existing knowledge and thoughts that go on to turn a rank, an ADP, an existing trade value into a trade calculator value. And then from there, it's an easy leap to auction.
Okay. How do you relate the trade values?
Yeah, so once you have a trade value that you're relatively happy with, you basically, this is actually the simpler part of the algorithm, is that you take the sum total of all of the money that's going to be available in that auction, and you take the sum total of the values that are in that auction, and then you kind of just do like a math thing where you go, okay, so this many total value points is equal to this many dollars. What is the value per dollar? And then multiply that through by however many dollars there are in your draft. So sometimes, in some leagues, you have it changes a little bit based on if you have a 20-team league with one copy, your dollar's got to go a little further. Whereas if it's in a 10-team league and you've got a whole bucket loads of money and your roster's pretty small, you're spending a lot more on the top person because only a few people are in there, right? So like the math changes a little bit, but it's really related to that.
So you're adjusting for roster size as well, not just percentage through total auction available monies.
Correct. Yeah.
Sorry, I'm talking to a smart guy, so my IQ obviously dropped several points for some reason. But yeah, you're adjusting for the value of roster space in some ways.
Yeah, absolutely. The more money you have in that auction, the more likely it is to skew that you can spend more at the top end of that auction, because at the bottom end, people are worth less. So the disparity is greater. So you're more likely to blow more money, if that makes sense.
Right. No, not really. But I'm going to listen back to this several times and see if I can figure it out. And where did you get you did mention you went to Pro Football Reference, right? But they don't have trade values or a trade calculator built in. You're taking that right from the DLF trade calculator kind of a thing? Because I happen to have a few stolen bits of data from there.
From Fantasy Pro, sorry. Pro Football Reference does NFL stats. What I do is actually scrape the Fantasy Pros rankings that are available for free, apply some kind of math algorithm to turn them into trade calculator values. It's actually a logistical curve. Yeah, it's like a logistical curve or exponential decay equation that basically scales so that the values fall quickly at the higher end of the scale, and then flatten out towards the end, so that you kind of have like a little bit of a curve, and then after a while, players stop losing value as quickly. The lower their worth, essentially.
Right. Have you made any recent adjustments for that based on, like wide receiver scoring being remarkably flat at a higher ranking these days?
Yeah, it goes back and forth a little bit on tweaking. In my Dynasty process calculator, the thing that makes that one unique is that I let people kind of adjust the decay factor on their own. So it's partially a preference thing. It's partially this league values depth a lot. So I decrease how much the penalty is, which brings up the value of the depth. Or you can say, no, this league's very studs and duds. So in this league, I'm changing the dial on that so that I'm deliberately using a decay curve that's very studs heavy. So I let people play with that more so than set that number for myself. I don't think that it's possible to sum up in one perfect number for every single league. There's scoring wrinkles, roster wrinkles, changes in systems. And I do a lot of work. Joe Sidlowski, he's the other partner on the Dynasty Process team. He's also a DLF guy as well. We do some work on expected points, and we're trying to figure out some stuff on projecting, like modeling points per game and so on. But we've yet to come up with a real algorithm that like takes rankings and spits out this is the number and really do a model on that. It's really still quite unknown. That I don't think it's very prescriptive at this point to pick one number for people, if that makes sense.
Because my thought is mostly I have no idea what I'm talking about here, but yeah, it makes sense to use an exponential curve. Essentially all that means is the difference between DeAndre Hopkins and say AJ Brown is exponentially different than the difference between Christian Kirk and Calvin Ridley. I think they're about the same number of spots apart, if memory serves, but obviously the value difference there is remarkably different in the first example than the second example.
Well, apparently Hopkins is worth a second these days, but
Well, apparently AJ Brown is worth $1 million first. But I mean, for reasonable people, it should be, wide receiver 1 to wide receiver 12 should be exponential compared to wide receiver. I think Ridley's 17 or so, and Christian Kirk. I think I know. Last time I checked, he was wide receiver 27. So 10, 12 spots apart.
Yeah, exactly. So that difference is smaller than the 1 to 12 for sure.
Yeah. My thought is, what if you hooked it up to scoring system? Like I'm doing projections, literally. So if instead of tying it to a trade calculator value, I tied it to the value that hopefully we project is going to provide for your roster, that puts it onto a non-linear number on a similar scale. And from there, you could convert it to auction dollars. If I'm trying to look for a common denominator, I think I might go through projections rather than trying to create a trade calculator formula in order to create an auction formula like that. Like I already have that. And that way I could adjust it just by the scoring system. And so you get a different value for the running back in standard than you do in PPR because they're projected to have different relative values in the two scoring systems. And so it kind of, for me, it would be something inbuilt instead of having, like, say, to create a trade calculator. Because I was in the chat that you guys were creating the trade calculator and mostly pulling this exact same face I've been doing while you were talking. While reading your message, just slack-jawed, tongue hanging out. I think I know some of those words. So I don't really want to take on two things that create static in my head rather than actual thoughts than one. But I think that would be an interesting way of looking at it. That creates a potential you could stop. I think that creates some interesting follow-on potential if I was actually able to balance that. So yeah, I guess I'll figure out how to make an exponential curve equation and try that one on it.
Yeah, actually, got some thoughts on that. So what I would say about that is that you're banking your model against consensus. So the two models for auction values that I've come up with and talked about so far are consensus like estimators, if you will. So I'm trying to guess what the average community person thinks, more so than what I think or what my model thinks or what my model projects to be those values. If you were going to do a projection system based on your models, I'd probably go for value-based drafting. So pick bench lines, maybe 1.5 times the number of starters, and measure what your projected points are against the projected points of that baseline is, and then use that as your value numbers instead of anything else. The trade-off with that is twofold. One, I like to use auctions to try to figure out like what I think the player will go for. So a model that you generate is very much going to be a model that only you have seen or only you put full stock in. Whereas a consensus that's built on a trade calculator value or an ADP position or a Fantasy Pros ranking is more likely to reflect what the average dynasty person thinks. So using that helps me plan out strategies a little bit better, I think.
Yeah, I'm just asking for questions from the audience at this point. Zach says, do I get college credit for this? I feel like you should. Zach. Yeah, I got some interesting ideas, at least I can run with, but I'm still not entirely sure I understand most of that. The trade calculator we're referring to is the one on dynastyleaguefootball.com. I think of it as Michael Zangoni's because he's the one I always bug about it. But it was a group creation with Tan and a whole bunch of people at DLF. It's available through their paywall. And that's a company, I guess they are at this point. Dynasty League Football or DLF that me and Tam both do meant to do some writing on. You said you feel like you're slacking. I've been working on the same article, it feels like, for a month, and honestly it keeps going from 10,000 to 200 words as I delete and rewrite it. So like I'm definitely slacking here or something. I have like a million ideas of things to write about, and I have successfully written none of them. Since really in draft season, and the focus shifts right now right to the draft, so no one's interested in the idea I had 3 weeks ago. Like, it doesn't matter anymore. Christian Kirk's value, like, no one cares. Tell me about this Chenault, you know? Do you have... He's segued rather skillfully, I feel. Any thoughts on the draft? Any favorite players? Any least favorite players you think other people are going to like? My main question for this class right now is is it a wide receiver or a running back class? Like, is this 2014 or is it 2000? I don't know. When was the running back class? 2018 or so? 17? 17 was good, yeah.
Okay.
Normally it's one or the other. We get some value from both, but the height of a class usually is very clearly skewed one way or the other. I can't find a well-balanced class with a lot of ceiling. I can find average classes where we didn't get much ceiling out of either, but I can't get a class where there was very little, where there was a great deal of ceiling at both positions. And, no one cares about tight end at this point. We'll just shop for him in 3 years, right? So what do you think of this draft class? What's the nature of it for you? Start big and work small, right?
To be honest, I like to do an exercise every year where I sit down and write out Excel, like in Excel, kind of put a list of tiers together. So, can I separate the top 4 running backs or the top X receivers or whatever into tiers and put them together? At this point, honestly, I actually think it's like a 4 running back class. I don't have any one of them ahead of the others before the draft. And likewise, I've got two top receivers and then a mess of other receivers that I think fit right after that. I think it's a top heavy, but otherwise fairly. It's an above average running back class, and it's a very good receiver class to me. So,
all right, just before I check your right thinking individual and the right 4 and the right 2 are in those spots, Matthew has a question over on Twitch. Hey, Matt, appreciate you joining in. Hey. It's a really good question, and I didn't have any, so I thought I'd skip back to his. He wants to know how much empty roster spots are valued in a calculator, or should be valued, perhaps, and should it change with roster size? I think what Tam was saying is that it should definitely change with roster size, because you have to spend up on the high price guys if you have a shallower league, and I think that follows on from that roster space is worth more in a shallower league, so it should definitely change with roster size. What do you think, Tam?
Yeah, it gives you flexibility. It depends. There's a couple of things it depends on, and we're talking about options specifically here. It depends on a lot on how your rosters fill out. Whether your league ends up being top heavy or not, and whether you actually do have to fill out your whole roster as well. Often you find yourself trapped with $1 bids towards the end because you've misallocated your budget. So it's really important to keep track of your budget that way. Empty roster spots aren't specifically allocated a value, but what it does, what the purpose of the calculator does is it calculates the value you're supposed to get per dollar, or the cost per dollar, like the value you get per dollar, and then you figure out from there, you figure out like how much you spend, whether that's at the top end or at the bottom end. You can track on the new app that I just put out for DLF. You can track how much money you're spending, and compare that to the mathematical value based on trade calculators where you're at.
Sorry, I forgot to turn my light on. I didn't think we were going live. Yeah, Matt, I smoke a lot, but I also roll my own, and I'm using like a fourth of the tobacco just to put it up a little defense. I found the habit is more important to me than the actual nicotine or tobacco, which is kind of where I want to be with it anyway. So it's not that I like it, but especially when, believe it or not, this is a high-stress situation. Not a talker by nature, certainly not a performer by nature, and I know I'm not performing. I don't do well at that. But people being here and watching and asking questions, believe it or not, I end up smoking a lot more than I even usually do. Just cut that shit out of the actual episode if we ever get to one.
It's 420 though.
Yeah, I think roster space. Yeah, I think in a straight up trade calculator, roster space should have value. And Like in the Dynasty League football calculator, they've got a package value adjustment. So if you're trading 3 players for 2 players, you get an extra minus on your value if you're receiving 3 players, and that's because of the roster space. I know it's something that Matt Kelly's talked about a lot on his trade calculator app and on his podcast as well. And it's a smart idea. We should put value on roster space. You know, as someone who's constantly trying to stack up late round tight ends and also all the undrafted free agents, it's something I became acutely aware of earlier. So it's something that's been articulated well and needed to be as well, because I never thought to even mention it. Again, just where I'm used to trying to add adjusted free agents to my roster, I was just kind of aware of it anyway.
Yeah, I think especially with trade calculators as well, the 4 nickel or 4 quarter 5, it's like 5 quarters to $1, which is to say that you can start one player and then start the other 4 players in those slots, right? But like if you trade 5 players for 1, it's hard to really start all 5 of those players without hurting your roster the same way that you like starting that one superstar player, then you can start a whole bunch of other players alongside them, right? So there's some element of replacement value that should be considered when you do a package, for sure.
Yeah, I definitely think it's something we should adjust for more, but it is, well, it's like anything else, it's exponential. If you're filling up your roster spots with Saquon Barkley's, it's fine. If you're filling them up with the undrafted free agents that I like to hoard, then you're basically wasting roster space. That should mostly be, and that's where the running backs always have value. Quarterbacks, actually, going back to the rookie draft, something that I'm starting to build into my, and I've got to upload it, but I'm going to release my rookie draft board and my rookie pre-draft ranks. I kind of lock them in around now so that I can go back and see what changed, what went right, and what went wrong before and after the draft. And it's provided some interesting, I think, insights into my process and some things that I've developed. And something I'm incorporating more and more is just accepting that tight ends, weirdly and incorrectly, and quarterbacks, even in 1 QB leagues, they maintain or elevate in value at a much higher rate through year 1 and year 2. And that's going back to that study I did for DLF and wrote it up and posted it somewhere, I'm sure. Now, the value is much, much less. So, a quarterback going up in value in a 1 QB league doesn't really mean much. But when you get into the 3rd and the 4th round and you are trying to value roster space, especially if you only have, 7 bench spots, quarterback and tight end are just a lot more likely not to lose you anything. And I'm trying to incorporate that more and more into my 3rd and 4th round. But it's difficult, man, because I don't want them. I want Quintus Cephas. I want Darnell Mooney. I want Justin Watson. I want all these guys that no one else is going to remember in a year. And I'm probably going to have to drop to pick up a streaming tight end anyway. But, I play for fun. Theory-wise, I know what I should do. But it's not fun, so I don't do it. But, yeah, roster space should definitely have value. Skipping back over to the draft for just a second, you were describing the nature of the class. Are you a right-thinking and proper individual? Test 1. Who are your top 4? You said you had a top 4
running backs.
Running back, yeah.
In a loose but not strict, in a loose order.
Yeah, right. Not
very tightly clumped. Jonathan Taylor, DeAndre Swift, J.K. Dobbins, Cam Akers are my top 4.
Yeah, it sounds about right. The order was wrong, so now I'm going to roast you for it, even though you get the joke. No. Now, yeah, those are pretty much the consensus top 4. I really think I have a top 3 and then A.J. Dillon. Like, he's in that tier, but he's someone I want to see it from the draft. If you know what I mean? It's fine. It's fine. I believe everyone. But I know I've heard bad things or mediocre things too. So for me, it's kind of a top 3 and then also this guy in the top 4.
Who's out of the top 4 for you? Akers?
Everyone else, I would guess. No, I've got the same top 4. It's A.J. Dillon, he's in the top 4. I get it. I'm not moving him out of that tier.
Right.
But if I were to draft today, and that's what I've done with my board, I'm elevating the very tippy top of the wide receiver class above Dillon. If I had to draft right now, I'm not missing on, despite all the theory and all the reasons you should go running back, I'm not missing out on CeeDee Lamb, for example, just to give you one of the names that should be in your top two, for the sake of Dylan at this point, despite the fact that that normally is a better idea and everything else. Like, no, not doing that. So when it comes down to a draft board, I kind of merge that the end of the first tier of running back and the top of the first tier of wide receiver. And there's kind of an uncertainty there. Now, in reality, I'm just going to completely screw it up in all my leagues and just go wide receiver because that's what I do. But if I'm going to tell you what should be done, it should definitely be those running backs. But even then, when I get to the end of that tier, I'm like, I don't know, man. I took a look at a lot of Rashad Penny over DJ Moore, and I know I can stomach that. No, I don't care that it's right. No. Now, to be clear, not even CeeDee Lamb is as good, quote unquote, of a prospect. By the way, I prospect evaluate as DJ Moore. Like, no one in this class is. DJ Moore would be the clear wide receiver 1. So who is wide receiver 2? Who's the other guy in that top 2 tier? It's weird. I actually have my top wide receiver tier also has 2 players in it. So let's go.
Jerry Jeudy is my second one. So very, very.
Yeah, you're wrong. Shut up.
On the market.
No, Judy's great.
Yeah, I think he's fine. I don't think he's special, but it's one of these things where it's like, I think he's the best of Alabama's receivers, and Ruggs is not by any stretch.
Well, Alabama didn't think that either, so we're good.
Right? So, like, I don't get it. But if there was a discussion for anybody, I would have Justin Jefferson as my number 2, aside from Jeudy. Like, he's the only other person I would consider in that second receiver grouping.
I think, yeah, it's just, especially with someone like Dylan, Zach Reed is saying that Dylan's way down for him. Yeah, I get that. Is it Dylan or Dobbins? I'm getting their names mixed up at this point.
You should. It's draft season. You're the one who's just telling me it's draft season. I should know all this stuff. Dobbins is the Ohio State guy, and
that doesn't mean nothing to me. Yeah, Dylan's a heavy rusher. It's Dobbins. Sorry, I was thinking of Dobbins as in my top 4. Damn it.
Oh.
Yeah, he fits in there. He's just someone. It's like. Who I don't actually know his name. I just know his initials. Clyde Edwards-Helaire. He's someone that could cross over into that tier with the right draft, and Dobbins is someone that could fall out of it with the wrong draft. And so there's just kind of this merging between tier 1 and tier 2 where I'm going to start in certain wide receivers. That's essentially what I'm saying. Yeah, I don't know running backs, and I certainly don't know college teams. Don't throw that noise at me, man. I should. I just don't. Yeah, my second wide receiver is Rager, and it's not because that's not a drastic overdraft. But we get wide receivers so wrong, especially at the top, that I can do that and feel pretty confident with it. Like if you go back and look at the guy we had ranked 1 and 2 overall over the last. Since DLF has had ADP, like you want like 2 of them ever. We do bad with the top of the class, which is where we have the most fun. It's another reason I think a lot of dynasty talk revolves around wide receiver. It's not just the value, it's not the position, it's the fact we get it wrong so much. You can be a little bit more cowboy. And if there's a wide receiver in this class that looks like his profile would fit among not just good, but the top echelon guys, it would be Rager's. Now Lamb and Jeudy and
Jefferson.
I was gonna say Jefferson. Lamb's definitely would look fine, would look perfectly natural there. To be honest. Sorry, I'm vamping while I look shit up. Yeah. Jeudy and Jefferson are there in my quote-unquote second tier. I don't know.
I wanted Rager to blow up the
I don't know.
I really wanted him to blow it up. But I think he bulked up enough to try to pull like incredible speed score stuff, and he was probably 10 pounds heavier than he played. He slimmed down and ran faster at his pro day, but of course, nobody was at his pro day. So he sent a highlight video, which amounts to nothing, right? So
stop lying to yourself. It means everything.
Yeah, basically. I think Jefferson will go ahead now.
Thank you. Sorry, I kind of zoned out there for a second, Tan. I'm back. What were you saying about how great Jalen Reagor is?
I have him as my fourth receiver behind Jefferson
terrible.
in the second tier. I don't think Reagor will go as high as he should because I don't think he tested well enough. And I think
that makes him even more my favorite. He's going to be the guy that falls in the draft that everyone's like, well, you got to take the draft capital guys over it. And a wide receiver, you kind of don't. You kind of do. Don't get me wrong. I'm going to have Henry Ruggs a lot higher than I have him because he's going to get first round draft capital. Yeah. Because you do have to value that. But you also kind of don't when you're talking about who the guy you really want is. And the guy I really want is Reagor. And if I'm going to get him because he's going to get that makes him more interesting to me. And you're right, Jefferson and Jeudy, well, you could have a 4-tier here as well, a 4-player tier here. I separate out those two. One, because Lamb is clearly above those other two. It's not like, DJ Moore and the rest of the class was for his class, but there's a slight separation there. Jeudy and Jefferson both look good, but Lamb's a little better. And then I just insert my guy who's one bad year takes him out of that conversation statistically, but I know from a long, boring history of staring at player stats that could, if it happens, that would just be, sometimes you have a bad year. And he did have a mixture of QBs, and you start to build in the excuses. He had a bad last year. I think the reason why Reagor drops is actually because people overvalue the last year compared to the average, and I prefer the average a little bit more of a player's overall career. And so, he's my 2 until the draft proves to me that I can't have him as my 2, and he's still probably going to be overly high for me. Jefferson is just. You can't find anyone say anything bad about Jefferson. And that's not like he's mediocre. There are great things here on his profile and apparently on his tape. I wouldn't know. Never seen the man play, obviously. But, yeah, he often is like the lost man. I'm starting to get not enough people are talking about Jefferson that it wouldn't happen. But after the draft last year, on my podcast, I was like, my big fear from this class is that A.J. Brown's just falling to a place I won't get any of him. Like, I like him a lot, but he was falling between running backs and below wide receivers that I wanted a little bit more. And that happened. And that worked out to also be a nightmare. So
that's pretty much the mindset I have for Jefferson, which is like
you want him, but you're going to reach on someone else. You're going to go for a running back. I don't think Jefferson's really good. Don't do that. Make sure you draft him if you get the chance. Jeudy, obviously, with that competition, his stats look a little lower. If we adjust just a tiny bit, because it is reasonable to suggest when we look at past examples that there is a slight ceiling cap on wide receivers if there are 2 NFL quality level wide receivers on the same depth chart. But we're talking 2 or 3%. Not the 12 to 15 that you would need to adjust Henry Ruggs. Like, you don't even have to adjust Jeudy. He still comes up fine. You can just know it's actually a little bit better, which means it looks more like Lamb. It looks more like Jefferson, and that's what it is. So, yeah, I guess apart from you not understanding who the second wide receiver should be, I think we're fairly similar in ranks here. What do you think about Bryan Edwards? Like, I love the look of his profile. My pre-draft model hated him. Hated him. It dropped into wide receiver 14. I've stuffed him up into my second tier of wide receivers because that's where he belongs, and my model should know it. We've had serious words about it. But, with Mims, Edwards, T. Higgins even, they fall into this similar range together as well. Do you have the same names around that range?
Yeah, I've got Mims. Mims in kind of that limbo between 2 and 3. So I've got tier 1 is like a 2-player tier. Tier 2 is a 4-player tier with Jefferson, Rager, Mims, and Ruggs at the bottom, kind of interspersed between 2 and 3 there. Higgins and Chanot are the next in tier 3. And then a little bit after that is tier 4 with Edwards, Pittman, and Johnson for me. So Edwards is like that borderline tier 3. I kind of do smaller tiers than you do, just because I like to intersperse kind of where I think the running.
I got a 2-tier top wide receiver. That's 2 players. How much tinier can I make it? My second tier at wide receiver is also 2 players. I don't really get. My third tier is a little overblown here. What are you saying, Tan?
My tier 4, Edwards tier 4 for me. And tier 4 in this case means 6, 8, receiver 9. Which doesn't sound too far off from what you had. I have about 9.
Yeah, this comparing rank stuff is boring. Who's a player that you're going to make people mad on because of how much you like him? Like, Rager's going to make... I don't think it's going to make anyone mad. I think I might start to make people mad with my KJ Hamler, Tyler Johnson, or Antonio Golden Gandy. I'm going to like them over a lot of players other people would prefer because I'm right and they're wrong. Because we're at that point in the season, people. I'm right, you're wrong. That's what we say to each other. Those are the only 2 options. Is there anyone, wide receiver, running back, anywhere that you think you're going to make people mad about how much you like them?
Let's see here. I think Antonio Gibson is as good as Clyde Edwards-Helaire and probably will do as well, even though he's drafted probably a round or 2 later. He's as good a receiver, I think, if not better, because he's actually a receiver. And he does the bare minimum kind of like Edwards-Helaire does. So, he's kind of my like plant the flag, second, third kind of running back, 3rd round dynasty draft running back that I'm looking at. Receivers, nothing too spicy. I kind of want Tyler Johnson to be good, but I feel like
you kind of want Tyler Johnson to be good. You kind of want Tyler What kind of hate are you bringing on my podcast here, man? Yeah, just to skip over to the chat here, guys. Yeah, I think Higgins, Mims, and who else are you talking about here? They all form. There's like a 3-player tier where Edwards is the other one. I kind of need to see it in the draft. Like Zach's saying, they need 1 to 3 round capital. I need to feel comfortable with how much their team likes them. Someone just comped Higgins to who was it, Mike Williams, and I could so see that. And I mean, Mike Williams lost a year, and I really think that slowed him down. I really think he was overdrafted coming over that after that injury. But he has shown improvement of something of what he was in that age 19 season, age 20 season is when he got injured. I could see Higgins. I comped Higgins to and I said, a rich man's Devin Funchess, and I assume that's going to hurt some people emotionally, but I mean it as a good thing. Like, Funchess has been good in the NFL, and it's not like a rich man's Funchess is Robbie. Another way of saying it would be like a slightly poorer man's Allen Robinson, maybe, and that's kind of who he's got to be in the NFL to produce. To produce at a fantasy level, anyway. But yeah, I kind of like my Funchess comp. No, I don't think anyone else does. Rich man, like an upper class. He lives on the west side, right? Is the west side good? He lives in a mansion. Someone drives him to work every day. A high class Devin Funchess who had a top 24 season. Rich man, yeah, and that's why I liked your. And Matthew saying a rich man's Funchess is Mike Williams. That's essentially what I'm saying. But you did get more out of Funchess in fantasy. You got a top 24 season. Mike Williams hasn't done it. La la la. But yeah. Essentially, that's the same player. yeah, I can see that.
Yeah.
So yeah, as usual, I think my dislike or slight dislike of players is actually what's going to be upsetting people. But I do think there's a few. And one you mentioned and who I was trying to get to. One, you're just wrong about Tyler Johnson, man. Just deal with it. He's good. And but you said you didn't see anything special about KJ Hamler. So could you explain yourself, sir? Like, why do you live this way? Why would you choose to live this way? That doesn't make sense, man. Just live a better life, draft the right players, right?
I honestly don't see him as like a I say prototypical, but getting at like that, like I don't think he's good enough to be a team's number one target. Where I think Reagor, Jefferson, Judy, Lamb do, and so he's kind of in that, like, I think he's destined for like a slot role, and he's not very good at it to me. So that's
okay. So like CeeDee Lamb is good enough, and KJ Hamler isn't. Like, what kind of insanity is that? Because like if you look at yards per team pass attempt, above the team's average, so the extra value that player is providing to the roster per pass attempt compared to everyone else. CeeDee Lamb gets like a 1.7 average, which is amazing. It's great. But like KJ Hamler's is 1.86. So like you're wrong, obviously, clearly. KJ Hamler is really good.
Okay, then.
got nothing for that.
Well,
the heat's too hot, right?
Heat's too hot. Maybe. I don't know.
Okay.
I haven't seen it. I haven't seen enough that I think, oh wow, he's gonna like stand up off the charts kind of thing. I think Lamb certainly plays differently enough to be a number one target, where I don't think Hamler is. So he's sort of, he might be quote where the NFL is going. He might be like that like small receiver prototype, but I haven't seen that. I haven't struck enough that I think super positively of that type. And would rather have someone who I think will go high and get target volume in the NFL a little bit more. Yeah.
Outside the breadth or the girth, as Zach Reed likes to say, because he's that kind of guy. I don't even know what that means. Of this class, I'm really interested in the number of mystery but exciting profiles. Like normally we get one or two guys. Like who was it that went to? He went to the Rams and like converted to wide receiver in his last season. I forget, but we've got a few positional converts that converted in college or might convert in the NFL. Like a little more than average, I think, for this class. You've got Lynn Bowden at wide receiver, who is his team's best quarterback for a season or two, and he's won 4 years playing as a wide receiver. He's phenomenally productive at the right age, but he's a mystery because we didn't get to see that play out. They switched him to quarterback, and he was actually half decent at quarterback, to be honest. And then you've got Antonio Gibson, who's either a wide receiver or a running back. No one can really make up his minds, and has a decent athletic profile, and once again, decently productive at both. Not phenomenally at either, but I mean, being good at both is an interesting prospect for an NFL draft prospect, to use the word twice. And then you've got Chase Claypool. The rumor is that he might convert over to tight end, which usually goes bad. And weird is bad for an NFL draft. The NFL tends not to like weird. They're a remarkably conservative, stodgy group. They're like, you're weird. I don't like that. It makes me feel uncomfortable feelings. I'm going to go back to using my regular guys the regular way I usually use them. Go away. And that's what usually happens in the NFL. And with Chase Claypool, he didn't play tight end in college, but he was productive enough at wide receiver that if he had been a tight end, he would be a great prospect, but he wasn't playing that position. But he's also physically built like a great tight end. So what do you do with these like exciting but mystery profiles? Are there any that stand out to you, or you have anything extra to sway us towards where we should draft them? Because I have all these guys. I think Antonio Gibson I'm probably at average on. Lynn Bowden I think I have higher than most. I've got him above Michael Pittman, for example. Chase Claypool's just the default wide tight end 3 because who cares? Just who cares about tight end ranks this year? You just take the guy that you like. So 3 may as well be 1. It doesn't matter. Any of them standing out to you in one way or the other, positively or negatively?
Yeah, I mentioned Gibson earlier. I think he's a, I want to say I should say arbitrage Clyde Edwards-Helaire. He's a better receiver, I think, and runs as well as he does, and so the team that uses him like McCaffrey, like Eckler, I think will get a really good starting player. probably an excellent second round pick in rookie drafts. Claypool's my number 2 tight end. I don't remember actually hitting on an athlete like that. I've tried like endless times on like
right.
Bucky Hodges, Burns in my memory for some reason, Jonnu Smith. That's
the thing. You have to basically have been playing fantasy for 20 years to get 2 tight end hits. And that's not because that's just not that many. Okay. So you can throw as many darts as you like. You rarely hit one.
But okay, so like absolutely best case, he could be Evan Engram. Like that's the size.
Whoa.
Like
that's
absolutely
okay.
best case. In that, like,
you were a Chase Claypool fan. That's what we've discovered.
Stop
it. Just tell people that. You don't have to do all this. Just say, well, Chase Claypool is Evan Engram, and they'll run with it. Like that's your hot take of this draft class. Tan Ho thinks that Chase Claypool is Evan Engram for sure. No, carry on. Sorry.
He's also Canadian, so I also have to stand him.
Oh, wow. That's great.
100% of the time. But he, like, absolutely best case, he could be that kind of, like, athlete receiver. He can't block for shit. So, do the teams use him? Do they actually use him? We don't know, right? Like, it's impossible to tell at this point what he's going to be. And I have yet to see prototypical athlete at receiver translate to tight end. Maybe Darren Waller, but that sort of doesn't really count because it happened like 5 years later.
Do you have any Adam Trautman? I don't know how to say the name, but he's a tight end that doesn't have realistic CFB stats. He played at a community college, basically. I'm actually starting to be reluctant to add those kind of guys into my database because it affects my models, and I don't think we're comparing the same thing when we look at stats from a certain level. And so I tend not to add them as much anymore. And so the only thing I've got in my ranking is Adam Trautman, no data. So do you have anything else you can actually help people out with? Because he looks good for where he played, and I think he's physically fine. Like he's built like he could do the position, but do you have any actual data on him that you could tell us about?
I honestly don't know who that is.
Okay, that's good.
Yeah, let me check. I can see if
I looked up his stats, and every time I say I don't have data on someone, there's some kind-hearted soul that goes and says, here you go. But like the reason I didn't do it, especially with a player that plays at that lower division, is because if I insert him into the sheet, it literally rebalances things. I mean, I think it overly weights everything because we're not really comparing the same thing. Like I played sports at my college, and if you compare what we were doing to like actual, national stars, it's not the same thing. And Trautman had great stats at that level, but I don't know I can adjust, even in an adjustment year, the adjustment year, enough to get a decent understanding of how well he played relative to his competition level. Even Antonio Gandhi, the 2 years he played like a Division II school, like Division II is fine. Trautman literally doesn't turn up on Sports Football Reference. Have I vamped enough? Have you looked him up? No. Yeah, we got nothing.
We got nothing, dude.
We got no data. That probably makes him the best sleeper ever. I mean, someone just said they have him as tight end 1, and this year I'm all for it, man. Just take him. Like, there's no one that really stands out at this. There's some decent profiles. Like, I like Cole Kmet for the same reason. It doesn't stand out. But in a class where nothing stands out, I like some of the things on his profile. Harrison Bryant wins overall in production in my tight end model, but it looks so water thin that I'm willing to just take Kmet if that's the guy there when I finally want a tight end. Albert O's got a great athletic profile. He's amazing in terms of his physical build. Same with Chase Claypool. And at least Albert O's actually played the position because they are two very distinct positions.
Right.
But I don't really take Trautman 1 overall. Just make sure you're doing it as late as all the other tight ends are going. And I think that's fine this year. It might be the year to just take a swing on that guy no one knows much about. Why not?
it's easy to be the best route runner in the class when there's a million miles of green grass and you're bigger and faster, like Jadeveon Clowney is relative to the rest of his competition ever.
Yeah.
It's hard to really do that, you know? Like, I want to see it, you know, when coverage is tight or when it's whatever, right? Like, it's really hard to say that, you know, Trotman is better or worse than any of the other guys because you can't really compare.
That's why you should grind the tape, Tan. And honestly, someone just said that. That's where highlights are actually useful. Not wrong. When you can't use any of his production to fairly compare him to anyone else, you're gonna have to use your eyes. You still have all the same problems, but there's really nothing on the other side to stop you. There's nothing to counter. So use what you've got. I don't know. Is bad data better than having no data? What do you think? I think John McNamara just posted that tweet. My thought was bad data is worse because it can lead you down the wrong path rather than knowing you're just throwing a dart. But, you know, film isn't data.
No, but analyst ranks are data in terms of
That's fair.
wisdom of crowds, right? Like I wrote something about this ages ago now, almost, where you kind of can sit on shoulders of other people and go, are there actually are they, you know, do people actually think this person is legit? If so, I'll take my chances on it. But if you don't have data, you don't have data, right? So if everyone's going to say he's really great, then, you know, we'll try it.
J Mike just turned up in the chat and he says he's here for the argument. So we're going to have to go back a step where you were wrong about KJ Hamler and Tyler Johnson, if you don't mind. Now, we corrected it. It's fine. Tan now believes, and he's got a hot take for you too, J Mike. He now believes KJ Hamler is good and Tyler Johnson is great. Stop it. That's why the editing is going to have it out. He also said that Chase Claypool is basically Evan Ingram. So that's good to know. You should make sure you I figured I should catch you up on that one, J Mike. Yeah, Chase Claypool, Evan Ingram, Tan Ho credited too.
Team Canada, baby.
He's an immigrant. He's coming to steal some poor American's job in the NFL. That's just the truth, right? I say as an immigrant currently working in America. I can I can make fun of immigrants because I am one. That's the way that works, right?
Yeah, sure.
Cool. Just checking. Because, you know, English immigrants have such a hard time of it. No problem, J Mike. I got you, man. That's basically all of it. Also, Tan said a lot of things at the start about algorithms and auction values. I can't really recap that. I don't really understand what he was saying.
Check out the app that I wrote. It just
yeah, he ran some kind of exponential curve regression analysis.
No, actually,
I just made that up.
No,
those were some of the words he used. I'm just putting them together into a sentence. Sorry, what are you going to say, Dan?
I just wrote an app that converts DLF trade calculator values to auction. It does some of the lower level math on that stuff. The getting to the calculator values, we can talk about for days. It's very, very nerdy.
You can talk about for days, man. I can listen Slack short for a little while, probably. And then I'll start, you know, mocking you about something else to cover up how inferior I'm feeling. That's my gig, man. That's what I do. Does anyone have any questions? Because Tan has no hot takes other than Evan Ingram being Chase Claypool and now agreeing with me completely about my ranks, which is what I heard.
Justin Jefferson, gang.
Justin Jefferson's pretty good, man. I really do worry that I'm going to end up with the same with AJ Brown. Like, I love him. Great. I want him on my team. I worry he's going to fall into that range where you end up taking someone else. Like, I'm going to reach on Rager because I love Rager and I'm, you know, trying to have fun. Or I'm going to take a running back because it makes positional sense. And then you don't have Justin Jefferson. And that sucks. So I want to highlight that because I should have listened to myself more last year with AJ Brown very clearly. No, J Mike just says you're very, very smart. That's all J Mike's got. No questions. Appreciate it. Okay. We're a little behind. I'm asking, and then they answer it like 10 minutes later. And also, we have no data on Adam Trautman. That was the other thing we should probably catch you up on. Like, no one knows anything about this man. Apparently, there's some pretty good highlights from where he was playing against car salesmen, not future car salesmen, actual car salesmen, just enjoying their weekend. I'm pretty sure that was what's going on when he was playing. I just made that up just to be real clear. I have no idea who was playing in that league. Probably some really good players. I don't know.
I mean, Daytona 500, pretty close, right?
Right.
It's about the same.
Real athletes.
Totally.
Come from there all the time.
Who am I looking to leave every draft with? My answer was Antonio Gibson. I think he's a receiver that I think he's as good a receiver as Clyde Edwards-Helaire, if not better, and will be used like Eckler and CMC types.
Actually, there's a name I wanted to mention. Benjamin. I've kind of liked his profile from the start, but he's a little smaller, and I haven't heard raving reviews, so he kind of fell to the back of my mind. But he's been in this second tier of running backs for me the whole time. I recently pushed him ahead of Keyshawn Vaughn, who's got a slightly better profile. Turns up earlier in my model, I think. I'd have to check that. But I don't want to forget Benjamin either. He's a pass catcher. He's a very decent runner. Most of the things I hear about size, and I'm always kind of interested in hedging that idea. So I really like Benjamin, man.
He's the very last person on my. These are the people I know about before the draft, and that's to say, I stopped at Benjamin after Vaughn, after Gibson, AJ Dillon, and Zach Moss. That's it. That's all I know.
Right. Yeah, I have both of those ranked above McFarland and Zach Moss, who I think are most people's mid-tier, the second-tier running backs are excited about. I think they look great. McFarland came up really high in my model, but again, you've got to, with running backs, production's a little more shaky. Got to accept that he was playing in a slightly easier situation based on where his team played, literally. But I mean, he looks good. Same with Zach Moss. I'm trying to value. Like I was saying at the start, and I said in that video about my draft board, Benjamin and Vaughn seem to have a little bit more of an edge, at least one aspect of their game. And I don't want to undervalue them because they have less of the overall profile. Sometimes it's okay to target Jalen Samuels, even though he's not going to be, Le'Veon Bell, or not going to be James Conner even. I mean, he's got something that he's particularly good at, and that can just show up. Austin Eckler, a decent runner, exceptional receiver, and that really showed up for us. And so I'm trying to incorporate that more into rookie drafts. Now, neither of those guys look like Austin Eckler receivers, but they have more of an edge in that department, I think, than a Zach Moss or a McFarland. But hey, what would I know? I don't even watch.
Zach Moss shows up in a whole bunch of people's rankings. I don't see it personally, but it's something that I've got on my radar in terms of meta-analysis of, okay, so some people are really high on Zach Moss. He's in that top 4 tier with people. So I'm kind of he's on my radar, but I don't necessarily have him in my top 5 at all, kind of thing.
Yeah, Zach Moss actually falls between Vaughn and Benjamin in my pre-draft model. Vaughn's 7th, Zach Moss is 8th, and then Benjamin is 9th. I've pushed both of them above him because, again, production's a little shakier at judging what a running back's actually going to do in the NFL. I think all three have profiles that show they can do good things in the NFL if they get chances. And then you rely on the draft to try and gauge who's going to get those chances. But I think Zach Moss is going to be favored, and probably by the NFL. If that's most people, whatever's spiking on Zach Moss's profile, it just feels like more of an NFL level evaluation. He looks good, he's solid, hard worker, rather than, hey, this guy seems to be especially good at receiving. That doesn't seem like an NFL argument. So Zach Moss probably is a little more likely to get opportunity. But again, I'm just kind of going to rely on the draft to adjust me on that.
Yeah,
Okay.
I'm getting
Moss is a discount Ray Rice, apparently, is Matthew's take. Okay.
yeah.
That sounds a lot more dynamic than I was thinking. Even a lesser version of Ray Rice. He was pretty dynamic, wasn't he? I seem to remember.
Yeah, I think so. I thought Ray Rice was like a pretty good athletic prospect. But
Yeah, that's what I'm recalling. Not so much an exceptional receiver as a dynamic athlete, and was able to transfer that to the NFL field, which is the other part of this. Athleticism matters for running backs, but we have a limited view of how well that athleticism is going to translate because of the way we know about athleticism coming from the combine. And this year, like you said before you even got on, Tan, this year we don't even have that limited view because pro days were canceled. The combine was weird and late in the day. Yeah, it's a little more tricky that way. But that's true for the NFL as well. Do you think that might breed a little more variance into draft capital? Like the NFL is going to get a little more right or a little more wrong because they can't do what they usually would do?
There's going to be less groupthink for sure.
You think? Okay.
I think so, but whether that's good or not, it sort of like scout how well they prepare for the draft. Like it's going to be more. It's going to show more of like the differences in how teams prepare, essentially, and like how teams evaluate their systems more so than like feeling forced to take somebody because they think someone else will take them. You know, like or like. This person's ranked really highly by our group scouting services or whatever, right? Like, I feel like it's going to have a little bit more variation there. Back to Moss for a sec. This may not be a player comparison at all, but in terms of how I'm valuing them and how asleep I am on Moss, it's kind of like Kareem Hunt is the name that comes up to me because I knew nothing about Kareem Hunt, even through all of the process, and he kind of blew up out of nowhere, and like people were like pointing back, yeah, I was on Kareem Hunt. And I was like, where were all you people? Because I knew nothing about Kareem Hunt. And that's sort of the same thing I feel like might happen with Zach Moss, where it's like a whole bunch of NFL people are going to be on him, and he's got his like legion of followers and fans, and I just don't know a ton about him right now. So
you don't know much about most people, it feels like. No, just joking with you. Yeah, Matthew says he's going to calm down when he was having fun. Don't you dare calm down. Don't you dare. We like riled up. We like fun. Keep it up. Yeah, I guess we should get towards getting out of here because we're not the open bar. We can't sustain 3 hours of entertainment. And let's face it, we're already a little less entertaining. We got a lot of different rookie talk in there. The auction value is really what I wanted to get to for... I don't know. I'll divide it up some way and try to make an episode out of it, if that's okay with you, Tan.
Yeah.
Could you tell everyone where they could find you?
Yeah, so I'm at @_TanHo. That's @_TANHO. I also run dynastyprocess.com, and I'm a developer at DLF. So I'm in around all of those things. Twitter. I have some kind of following on Reddit, apparently.
Okay.
And Discords, like a couple other things like that. So I'm around. My takes, I don't have a ton of player takes, as Peter tried to drag out of me and whatever, but I have ideas about how you should look at things, which is to say that you don't want, which is to say, I look at how other people think about things, and I kind of like take all of those things in more so than make my own direct takes. So I don't have a ton of player takes. I have a ton of how you should run your team takes, and I have calculator takes and auction takes.
Thanks, Tan. Yeah, and that's @_TanHo on Twitter. He's fun and, just a little bit too smart. It gets annoying sometimes, but it is useful to have that guy around when you don't understand something. Trust me. Constantly running to those kind of people, and Tan's definitely on that list. One thing I would say just before I get out of here, you said there might be a little less groupthink. I was thinking there might be a little bit more. Now, obviously, whether you're the smart guy, maybe I'm wrong here, but it just made me think of a draft room and Twitter and how we all get together and we start commenting and talking, and everyone has the same top 4 running backs and everyone has the same top 2 wide receivers. Like, I was wondering if like NFL GMs might get even more what's the word? Bubbled more into their own heads, and AJ Dillon's man. I'm going back to 1970. We're gonna run this stuff like we used to. Enough of this internet stuff. We're going back to the day. But yeah, that was my thought on it. Because that's more fun to think about the draft going that way. That they're all running it more like a fantasy draft, so everything's going to become more like a fantasy draft. Yeah. But that's me. And obviously, that's exactly what's going to happen. No, I have no idea. But thanks for coming and talking to me for a while, Tan. I really appreciate it. And I'm sure after a few listens, I will get some understanding of what you were trying to patiently teach me about auction values there, and I'll try and apply it. And thanks for everyone checking us out live. Appreciate you. And anyone listen to us on the Dynasty Crossroads, if anyone still does that anymore. And no, we're kind of a YouTube thing. Today, at least. But really appreciate you all, and I will talk to you again next week. Bye. That's the end of a podcast right there, guys. We're gonna end the live. Tangier has somewhere to be. I kind of should check out my kids at some point, but if you have anything else you want to talk about, we can do it live. We do it live.
No, I don't know. I've been up for a little while, so I'll take any questions. Is there an app for that? I can probably answer. Yes, that I can probably answer it. But yeah.
All right. Anyone got any more questions? Now we wait to see if anyone does. I'm gonna stop my Audacity, by the way.
Oh, I should do that.
Just try and do the same. Save the CPU a little. Nope.
So I've had a fire take that I haven't had to research before, but essentially I've had a theory for a little while that I've been working on, like thinking through and trying to figure out, which essentially is to sell all second-year players and buy rookies for those same players. I'm not big on the second-year breakout, which I've been fleshing out as a theory for a little while. I think Drew Austin-Chuck we had a touch base on it, and he was doing some of the math on it as well. But basically, you were talking about how quarterbacks and tight ends don't lose value in year 2. And
I have to look, but I'm pretty sure, yeah.
You think something like that, and I actually had kind of an opinion that you should sell everybody if you can.
Pretty much always. If you're getting more value, yeah. I mean, on average, you should sell.
If they haven't broken out, my theory is that the players who haven't broken out are also less likely to break out than a rookie.
How so?
In that, knowing that they had a shit year 1, like injuries aside, I would rather re-roll the dice for the same price, because people around Dynasty will pay the same price that they had initially for that player. So, like Corey Davis, for example, and he is a near and dear player to my heart in terms of his prospect player profile, but I wanted to, and actually managed to, sell Corey Davis for the same price that I bought him at, which is 102, and proceeded to take Nick Chubb at 102, and just continually churning that until you get that, like, bam, you nailed the rookie. Because I feel like there's an anchoring bias on a player like Corey Davis. Where
it works if you get the right value, though. I don't think you're getting the 102 for N'Keal Harry. You know?
Try. And so even if even if you only get the 105, the
I don't think you're getting the 105 for N'Keal Harry. He's worth a second right now.
If he's worth a second round now, right? And so the price matters, but
not to J Mike, but yeah.
The price matters. But you can probably go out and find. Not everybody in your league will buy Harry at 105 or 108 or 107 or whatever, but there is probably a probability that you could go find somebody out there who's a Harry fan, and they'll pay 107, 108, 109, something like that. And at that price, I think statistically speaking, you could re-roll the dice on a player that disappointed like Harry and go after a new sexy receiver like Jefferson could be at that spot. And you can re-roll that quality until they explode and profit.
I think that's what I'd add to it. It's about the right, draft the right players. But if you can roll over your value into the same value or similar value and get an extra year, that's always going to mathematically on average work out. If you're constantly rolling it back to a pick, becomes a pick next year, but eventually you need players. And that's where you get to choosing the right players. Like, not all these second year players are created equally. And not all those draft picks are created equally. If you trade second year DK Metcalf, for example, for I don't have a good one from last year. Let me think of another one. Like, if you trade it back into a rookie draft for say the 106, 107, like you were saying, you could get Rashad Penny all the way to the 108, and you traded a disappointing wide receiver from the year before, and who would that be? That could have been Christian Kirk. I don't think he won that trade. Calvin Ridley hit that year.
So, like, all of those
DJ Moore, you could have ended up doing that with DJ Moore and gotten Rashad Penny. And that's what I mean. They're not all created equally. On average, you're better off going with a player you know more about, and you know more about a player with a year of history. But if that year of history is concerning, Corey Davis was okay. But then if you compare it to like an A.J. Brown, where he broke out, so that's not a fair comparison either. Like, this year's class is a difficult one to do it with. But
so
they're not all created equally. It works in theory, but you gotta. It's not all players all the time. Whereas on average, you know that the second year is the most likely for players to break out, a wide receiver anyway. Rotoviz says for tight end as well, but I don't find that at all.
Maybe
I think it's about age.
I think Brian Malone was the first person I saw say something like this, but I would re-roll those guys. DJ Moore was worth more than the mid-first round pick you paid for him. If you could probably have gotten more than a first, like 2 firsts for him. Rashard Penny is an ideal example. There are people who still thought Penny was a first, even though he had done dog shit the year before that. And so the second year of Rashard Penny, the second offseason before Rashard Penny, you could have sold him to somebody for a mid-late first and re-rolled that dice, getting out of Rashard Penny earlier.
But that's the thing, though. He was still worth a first. You realize the percentage and the likelihood of him doing this little this far into his career, it was in the single digits. And it's not like, haha, it didn't happen. Let's take out the player evaluation here. If you do that all the time, if you make that your policy, more often than not, you're going to. That's what the averages tell us. More often than not, second-year players break out. Most players break out in their second year. Players that break out in their second year tend to be the top 12 dynasty wide receivers, not the top 24 dynasty wide receivers. On average, you're going to be bleeding value year after year, surely. Unless you always get it right. But if you're saying you can always get it right, you're saying my prospect evaluation this year is going to be 100% perfect. Last year, I was a little off. I know.
No, so what my theory suggests isn't that. My theory suggests that given that they did poorly in year 1, they are not as likely to break out in year 2. Not year 2.
That's true. That's true. But then we go to Rashard Penny, and he might have been worth a first, but he wasn't worth the same first. It dropped in value. N'Keal Harry isn't worth the same first he was last year.
No, and that's okay.
why I can't trade for him. He's holding value. He hasn't increased in value, but he's holding value, and I won't pay it as a big N'Keal Harry fan.
But I
league
would
by
sell
league,
him,
it's going to be different. But
I would sell him to you in my leagues if you were in a league with me, because I know you like him.
Yeah, but
And
I'm not paying a first. That's why I can't get him off of J Mike.
Right, but there is somebody who would.
It becomes, if someone's gonna misvalue someone, I'll do it. But that's kind of always true, right?
Right. So I feel like there is a tendency there that you should be trying to push. Like, the assumption that Rashard Penny was still worth a first is one that I would challenge. Yeah, he absolutely went down in value. He was like a 106 or whatever. And you could, the next year, you could sell him at 112, but you would rather have 112 than Rashard Penny's production that year. And what I'm generalizing is that, given that he was poor before, you can't get out at a first still. It might be like excessively conservative and insulating to poor, but I would totally be selling a N'Keal Harry right now.
Yeah, me too. But that's where they're not created equal. Like, I would probably end up doing what J Mike is, which is just kind of standing on the hill, because the prospect profile is so good and the first year is so bad. And so you start making excuses of the first year. On average, that player doesn't break out. In fact, in the 75th, 95th percentile, that player is not going to break out. But he could, and he's got a really good college prospect profile. So I don't know that the value is always going to work. If you can do that, I don't know. I
haven't done the research to really.
I don't know. It's more of a policy than, if I can get someone to overpay, I'm going to do it. And I get that. But I don't know it's more than that. Like, selling players that did bad in their first year. Bad has to be defined, but like, we can put a definition on that. Players that get less than 10% target share in their first year at wide receiver, they're less likely to break out come year 2 or year 3. So you sell them and roll it back into draft capital. I'm fine with creating like definitions of what bad looks like and trying to sell those players before their value diminishes, but like, it has to have that kind of definition on it. It's not all second year players. I think you'd be bleeding value if you did that. But if you sell players that fall under a certain threshold in the first year, I think there's potential for that to pay off. Yeah, like JJ Arcega-Whiteside is one, if we want to take it away from the emotional high of N'Keal Harry, like, clearly. But like, what's JJ Arcega-Whiteside worth? I think he was worth like a late first, early second-ish last year. And you're right. So what's he worth now?
A third?
Yeah, exactly. Is that worth it? Or take the ride on,
I don't know. You could probably get, who am I looking at here?
He technically should, but I guess what your idea is saying is people will still hold him at that early second round value. In which case, I agree with what you're saying.
No, I would sell him for mid-second and take a Tyler Johnson.
Would you take a third?
Could I sell JJ Arcega-Whiteside for 2.10, which is pick 22 in a draft, and take the 22nd ranked player today, which to me, just very loosely, is Tyler Johnson? Would you take Tyler Johnson or JJ Arcega-Whiteside?
Tyler Johnson.
Right? So just sell him
if the value works out, yeah.
Right? Like, and that, I feel like that holds, even though, yeah, you absolutely lost, but like, you've already, it's like a sunk cost. You've already lost.
That's what I was going to say. Sunk cost is a real problem people struggle with in Dynasty, and you do have to get over that. You spend it, you're not getting it back. So either you ride it out hoping you're going to actually increase in value, which is a lower odds bet, or you just stop the fall, right? That makes sense.
And I think that the exit point is more often than not in the second year, because if it bottoms out continuously, then you're bad at picking prospects. But assuming that you think decently about your ability to pick prospects, and that's the fun of Dynasty. You really want to hit that, and like you want to re-roll it. And I feel like there's like a thing where somebody still likes Harry. You still like Harry. My friend Joe still likes Harry, but
yeah, I like Harry at a new value, and that's what I'm inserting in here. Like, I wouldn't pay what I would have paid for Harry last year, like, because I've seen 1 year, and that year is valuable information, and it puts him on a different trajectory. And again, if you can get someone to make the mistake of not doing that, then that's always a good value. But I do think that has to be built into the concept. It has to be players who have done a certain level of bad for a start, and then it makes complete sense. But then it's about finding that person in your league that will pay you, whatever.
But so pick 12 or N'Keal Harry. 12.
Right? No, like I say, for me, he's mid-second. I would trade him out for who's in the mid-second for me right now. That's the thing. I'm not really looking at ADP as much as my own board right now. Like, what did I say? A mid-second was going to be, T. Higgins.
T. Higgins or N'Keal Harry right now?
I would take Harry. I think that's fine. Mid-second's fine right now.
Okay.
But I wouldn't know who that mid-second actually is until the draft this weekend. But yeah.
But so like it's a theory that I've been like tossing around for a little while, where it's like the exit point, even if it's depreciated, that's still the exit point because they're poor. And so
if they hit a certain threshold of bad in their first year, yeah, I'd agree with that. What do you do with the specific examples, just to roll back through them? Like, Penny was good on the opportunity he got less opportunity. And running back doesn't work the way, I don't think, that you can say that was because of something he did. And Derrick Henry, for example, is a guy who started for 3 years, but if you hung on to him, he got less opportunity than we necessarily thought he was going to get. Like, that could happen for Penny as well at some point. So
but that's
do you adjust that based on what kind of season they have?
It's more of a heuristic where if you can exit and re-roll on a rookie, I'm starting to think I would do it on a whole.
But not if someone has like a season like DJ Moore had. That's what I'm saying. Like, if you have an AJ Brown season, you don't re-roll it and hope to score again.
No, but you could
because you're getting the same value.
You're not re-rolling. But if you sold AJ Brown today, you're not getting. You're not re-rolling for the value you paid for him. You're re-rolling
That's a fair point.
For startup first value. And if you exit,
you would get a first plus, ideally, right?
You would get. You could get, I don't know, Keenan Allen plus a first or some ridiculous number.
It is about the perceived level of bad, though, J. Mike. Because that's what I was just saying. Like, you can sell AJ Brown right now and get more for him, but again, he's a first-year breakout. The reason he's getting a little bit overvalued, but even if we put him in the top 15 instead of the top 12, which is a little crazy, it's because the potential at that that age doing that well is a lot more than what you have to pay for him right now. That's when it pays off. So, like, just selling all the AJ Browns mean you never get that. Well, maybe you'll get that ceiling, but you'd have to get it on proven players. So you'd have to get a first plus another player with a great deal of potential already in the league, maybe. But yeah, I see what you're saying. It can make sense if you're still second-year players, but you got to sell them at the appropriate.
You could probably go out
that's
and
always
get
true value.
Keenan Allen plus a mid-late first.
That's kind of the name that was occurring to me. That's probably definitely something you could do right now. I just saw someone trading a whole bunch of weird stuff for it and AJ Brown, but even like taking it to not in my league standard, and you could still get something like that. I think like a Keenan Allen or a Calvin Ridley, maybe. You don't even have to go outside the top 24, and you could get a first plus for AJ Brown right now, one of those players.
Yeah.
So yeah, that works,
right? whether it's high or
I was talking about selling for less. It's only a certain level of bad if you're going to sell for less than you've already invested. But sunk cost is a real problem that way. You have to be realistic about what is a bad and a good season. And honestly, I don't know. And that's what I meant about Rashad Penny. I don't know how you judge how you find the Rashad Pennies. If you know what I mean? Like wide receivers, we can come up with some pretty significant thresholds. If you don't cross them, then. But with running back, where it's much more about team opportunity, like you would have lost out on more, I think, by always re-rolling. I might be wrong on that. Again, I don't have a good understanding of what I can very firmly say, like, I'll have a very high percentage of players don't break out if they don't get, say, a 10% target share per game, even if we go that length, in their first year. That's a pretty hard ceiling, and where you'd hit most of the time. I don't know if something like that with running back or tight end or quarterback.
See, I think Derrick Henry is the exception to the rule on that.
Very much so, but you've also got Aaron Jones. You have more of them, is what I'm saying.
Right, and you could have sold Aaron Jones from. I think Aaron Jones appreciated from year 1 to year 2. I don't think he depreciated. So
probably, yeah.
If he cost 108, you could have sold him for 102, probably. He looked like he was going to be the workhorse back in Green Bay. We didn't think Jamal Williams was going to be Jamal Williams, which is to say, unreasonably.
Well, I did, frankly, but yeah, I see what you're saying. We'd have to take it out of this, allegory of I remember this player and you remember that player, and actually take a look at what happens on average. And I've never looked at it that way. I'm normally looking on where I buy, not where I sell. So yeah, it's an interesting process to reverse it almost.
Yeah, and so it's a pod in itself, and I haven't got enough. Like, I'd have to go back and I got the ADP to research it. I just haven't really put in the time recently to do it. But it's a pod in itself what you would talk about this and present this theory essentially.
Yeah, I think this is probably a better argument than the argument we had, to be honest. But yeah, definitely get it together, and I'll talk to you about it if you want when you're ready to. Yeah, I'd be interested. I'm gonna go put all my second-year players on the bench and see what rolls in. I guess that'll be my research on the trade bait. Sorry.
Yeah, try it.
J-Mike Tan told you, the smart guy told you should really sell me N'Keal Harry. Wouldn't you like Mims? Wouldn't you like Mims? You want Mims. Come on, J-Mike. He's not responding. Okay. All right. Appreciate it, Tan. Really do. No, thank you, Pedro. Got it. Really appreciate talking to you, man. That was fascinating.
Yeah, we'll chat again.
Let's do it again sometime, man. Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Bye, J-Mike. I think J-Mike's the only one left in there. Someone else? No, we got 2. And bye, whoever you are, Mystery Watcher. Really appreciate you guys, and we'll talk to you again next time. Bye, Tan.
Bye.
I'm going to end the broadcast. If I can find the button. Bye, guys.